Part 1. On the outer edge of the known galaxy, where starlight grew thin and silence stretched like an endless ocean, the research vessel, Aurora Dawn, drifted through space. Its hull was silver gray, worn by years of travel, and its sensors hummed softly as they scanned the void ahead. Inside the ship, Captain Daniel Holt stood alone on the observation deck, his hands resting on the cool railing, his eyes fixed on the star map glowing in the center of the room. The map showed every system the Celestial Concord had ever charted, thousands of worlds, trade lanes, and colonies, all connected by lines of light. But at one edge of the map the lines stopped, abruptly, cleanly, as if someone had drawn a wall across the stars and said, "No further." That wall was human space. For over 200 years, no ship from the Concord had crossed it. No probe had returned. No signal had come through. The official records called it the unmapped zone, but everyone whispered the same thing. Humans lived there, and no one dared to ask why the chart ended. Daniel had grown up hearing stories about humans. His grandfather, a scout in the early days of galactic exploration, used to say they were strange, brilliant, stubborn, and fiercely private. He claimed they once saved his ship during a solar storm, patched his hull with their own hands, and vanished before he could even thank them. "They don't want praise," his grandfather would say. "They just want to be left alone." Now, standing before that blank edge on the map, Daniel felt the weight of that silence. He wasn't supposed to be here. The Concord Council had ordered all vessels to stay at least 3 light years from the border. But 3 days ago something had changed. A distress signal, faint, broken, and unmistakably human in origin, it had pulsed from just inside the boundary. It lasted only 17 seconds before cutting out. The council dismissed it as a glitch, a ghost echo from an old war. But Daniel knew better. He'd heard the tone. It wasn't a machine. It was a voice. A real one, strained with fear. He hadn't told his crew everything. He'd simply said they were running a routine sensor calibration near the edge. But Lena Cruz, the ship's xenolinguist, saw through him right away. She'd been studying human culture for over a decade, piecing together fragments of old broadcasts, poetry, and ship logs from before the Great Silence, the time when humanity stopped speaking to the rest of the galaxy. She believed humans hadn't gone dark out of anger. She thought they'd chosen silence on purpose. "They're not hiding," she told Daniel once during a late-night watch. "They're protecting something." Now, as the Aurora Dawn hovered less than a light hour from the border, Daniel made his choice. He activated the comms and called Lena to the bridge. She arrived quickly, her dark hair tied back, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "You're going in, aren't you?" He didn't answer right away. He just pointed to the screen. A tiny red dot blinked near the edge of the map, the last known location of the distress signal. "If someone's out there calling for help and we do nothing, what kind of explorers are we?" Lena nodded slowly. "The Concord will strip your rank. Maybe worse. Let them," Daniel said. "I'd rather lose my title than my conscience." With a quiet command, he engaged the engines. The ship shuddered slightly as it pushed forward, crossing the invisible line that no one had crossed in generations. The moment they passed it, the sensors went quiet, not broken, just silent, as if space itself had taken a breath. Outside, the stars looked different, brighter, sharper. There were no automated beacons, no navigation buoys, no signs of traffic. Just empty space and the faint glow of distant suns. It felt peaceful. Too peaceful. Lena monitored the comms, scanning for any signal. Nothing. Then, suddenly, a flicker, a repeating pulse, weak but steady. It was coming from a derelict freighter drifting off their port side. The ship looked ancient, its hull patched with mismatched metal plates, its name barely visible. Wanderer's Hope. Daniel guided the Aurora Dawn closer. No weapons powered up. No alarm sounded. The freighter was dead in space, but its core still held a faint charge. They suited up and boarded through an airlock that groaned open with surprising ease. Inside, the corridors were dark, lit only by their helmet lamps. There were no bodies, no signs of violence, just empty rooms, floating tools, and a single data core blinking green in the cockpit. Lena retrieved it carefully. Back on their ship, she plugged it into the main console. The system booted slowly, revealing logs from the captain, a man named Eli Morgan. His voice, tired but calm, filled the bridge. Log entry 342, we strayed too close to the Krelvex war zone. Took heavy damage. Thought we were done for. Then they came. Human patrol. No questions. No demands. They welded our hull, gave us fuel, and pointed us toward the nearest neutral port. When I asked why they helped us, the officer just said, because someone had to. Then they left. Like ghosts. The final entry was shorter. If anyone finds this, don't try to find them. They don't want to be found. They just want the galaxy to survive. And maybe that's enough. Daniel and Lena exchanged a long look. Before either could speak, the ship's proximity alert chimed softly. A new contact had appeared on the sensors. Silent, fast, and closing in. No ID tag, no broadcast. Just a sleek, dark shape matching their speed. Lena's breath caught. They know we're here. Daniel stood tall. Then let's see what they have to say. Outside the viewport, the human ship hung in the void, motionless, watching. It didn't threaten. It didn't flee. It simply waited, as if it had been expecting them all along. The human ship stayed still, a shadow against the stars. It made no move to attack, no signal to warn. It just watched. Daniel felt his pulse in his throat, but kept his voice calm as he gave the order to hold position. Lena stood beside him, fingers hovering over the comms panel, ready but not afraid. Then, without warning, a voice came through the speakers. It was smooth, clear, and spoke in perfect Concord standard, the common language of the galaxy. You are outside your charted zone. State your purpose. Daniel took a breath. This is Captain Daniel Holt of the research vessel, Aurora Dawn. We detected a distress signal from this sector and came to investigate. A pause followed, not long but heavy, like the voice was weighing his words. Then it returned. Distress signals are not your concern here. Turn back. Lena leaned forward. We found a human freighter adrift. Its log spoke of your people helping others without asking for anything in return. We only want to understand. Another silence. Longer this time. The human ship drifted slightly closer, its shape now clearer, sleek, dark gray with no visible weapons or markings. It looked more like a courier than a warship, but something about its stillness felt powerful. Finally, the voice spoke again. Follow, do not transmit. Do not record. Do not deviate. The human ship turned slowly and began moving away. Daniel exchanged a glance with Lena. This was it. No turning back now. He nodded to his pilot, who matched course and speed. The Aurora Dawn fell into line behind the stranger, gliding through empty space like a child following a quiet guardian. They traveled for hours. No chatter, no scans, just the hum of engines and the occasional flicker of distant stars. Lena watched the view screen, searching for patterns, for signs of civilization. But there was nothing, no stations, no ships, no debris. Human space felt less like a territory and more like a secret. Then it appeared. A ring-shaped station hung in the void ahead, massive and quiet. Its outer surface shimmered with green, real plants growing in open-air gardens under artificial sunlight. Solar panels curved along its spine, and observation decks dotted its rim, each one empty, peaceful. There were no weapon turrets, no docking bays swarming with activity. Just calm. Order. Life. The human ship led them to a small unmarked bay on the lower arc of the ring. As the Aurora Dawn settled into place, magnetic clamps locked gently onto its hull. A soft chime sounded through the ship, airlock pressure equalizing. Prepare for boarding, the voice said. One representative only, unarmed. Daniel looked at Lena. You should go. You know more about them than anyone. She shook her head. They asked for the captain. That's you. But take this. She handed him a small earpiece linked to the ship's translator, in case they speak in something other than standard. He nodded, removed his sidearm, and stepped into the airlock alone. On the other side, a woman waited. She wore a simple gray uniform with no rank, no insignia. Her hair was short, her eyes calm, and she held a steaming cup in her hands. She offered it to him without a word. Daniel took it cautiously. The smell was warm, earthy. Tea? He asked. Earl Grey, she said. Grown on Earth, real leaves, not synth. He blinked. Earth. The word felt ancient, almost mythical. You're from Earth? I live there part of the year, she said. Name's Mara Finch, I'm your liaison. She led him through quiet corridors lined with soft light and living walls of ivy. There were no guards, no scanners, no sense of threat at all. It felt more like walking through a library than a military outpost. They reached a small room with a window overlooking the stars. 2 chairs sat by a low table. Mara gestured for him to sit. "You came for answers," she said, pouring another cup. "But answers come with weight. Are you ready to carry it?" Daniel sipped the tea. It was bitter, then sweet. "I have to know why no one crosses this border. Why your people vanished from the galaxy." Mara looked out the window. "We didn't vanish. We stepped back. After the Third Expansion Wars, after the Krell tried to enslave 3 species using human-engineered AI, after the Zenthar plague that we accidentally spread while trying to help, we realized something." She turned to him. "Every time we reached out, someone used our help as a weapon. Our tech became tools of war. Our kindness became leverage. So we made a choice: stop explaining ourselves. Stop letting others define what we are." Daniel frowned. "But that distress signal, Eli Morgan's ship, you helped him?" "Because he didn't ask for anything but a chance to live," she said. "We still watch. We still act. But quietly. From the edges. We stop wars before they start. We guide lost ships home. We clean up cosmic debris that could wipe out colonies. But we never take credit. Never show our face. Why?" Daniel asked. "Wouldn't the galaxy be safer with you leading it?" Mara smiled faintly. "Power attracts greed, and greed breeds war. The moment we became the Guardians, every faction would try to control us, copy us, or destroy us. Silence is our shield. For us, and for you." Just then, the comms in Daniel's earpiece crackled softly. Lena's voice, barely a whisper. "Daniel, sensors just picked up energy spikes near the Krell border. A fleet is mobilizing. They're heading toward the Vex homeworld. It's the start of another war." Mara's expression didn't change. "She already knew, you see?" she said gently. "Even now, while we speak, the cycle begins again. And in 3 days, that fleet will mysteriously lose navigation. Their comms will fail. Their fuel lines will clog. No explosions. No blame, just a quiet stop." Daniel stared at her. "You're doing that?" "We've been doing it for 200 years, she said. "Not with armies. Not with speeches. With silence, with care. With the understanding that sometimes the best way to protect life is to let it believe it saved itself." He thought of the blank edge on the galactic chart. Not a wall. A promise. Before he could respond, Mara stood. "Your ship must leave. You may return to your people. But you will carry no data. No coordinates, no proof. Only what you choose to remember." Daniel stood too. "And if I tell them everything?" "Then you break the silence," she said. "And the next war won't be stopped. It will be fought with human weapons, human strategies, human names on every battlefield. Is that the future you want?" He had no answer. Back aboard the Aurora Dawn, Lena waited anxiously. "What did they say?" Daniel looked at the ring station through the viewport. Calm, green, alive. "They said we were never supposed to come here." He walked to the command console and deleted the sensor logs. Erased the coordinates. Wiped the comms archive. Lena watched, then nodded slowly. She opened her personal drive and locked her notes behind a biometric seal, hers alone. As the ship pulled away, the human vessel reappeared, escorting them back to the border. At the edge of human space, it stopped. No farewell. No warning. Just a slow turn, and then it vanished into the dark. The Aurora Dawn floated alone once more, the blank edge of the map glowing ahead. Daniel didn't speak. He just set course for home, carrying a truth too heavy for words, too precious for proof. And somewhere behind them, unseen, the quiet work continued. The journey back to conquered space felt longer than the trip in. Not because of distance, but because of silence. Daniel sat in the captain's chair, eyes on the star field, mind replaying every word Mara had said. Lena worked quietly at her station, reviewing old human poetry files she'd saved years ago just in case. Neither spoke much. There was too much to hold inside. When they finally crossed back into mapped space, the comms lit up with routine traffic, trade updates, patrol reports, weather alerts from nearby colonies. Normal sounds, safe sounds, but to Daniel it all felt fragile now, like a house built on sand. He knew what lay beneath the surface of galactic peace. Not treaties, not alliances, but the unseen hand of humanity, gently holding the pieces together. 3 days later, news broke across the conquered channels. The Krell fleet had turned back. No reason given. Their leaders claimed a technical failure in navigation systems. Experts were baffled. The Vex celebrated. War had been avoided, again without a single shot fired. Lena looked at Daniel. They did it, he nodded. And no one will ever know. Back at Concord Central, they were summoned before the High Cartography Guild. Officials wanted a full report on their unauthorized border approach. Daniel stood before them in his uniform, calm, respectful. He explained they'd chased a false signal, found nothing, and returned. He showed them clean logs, empty scans, a ship with no anomalies. The guild frowned but had no proof of disobedience. They issued a formal warning and dismissed him. That night, over a simple meal in the officers' mess, Lena asked the question that had been burning in her since they left human space. "Do you think we did the right thing? Keeping it secret?" Daniel stirred his drink. "If we'd told them, the Concord would send fleets to map human space. They'd demand meetings, tech exchanges, alliances. And humans would disappear deeper. Maybe cut off help altogether. Innocent worlds would suffer because we couldn't keep a secret." Lena sighed. "But isn't truth more important than safety?" "Not always," Daniel said. "Sometimes truth is a weapon, and silence is the shield." Weeks passed. Life returned to routine. But something had changed in both of them. Daniel started reviewing old Concord records, not for data but for patterns. He noticed how many near wars had fizzled out with no clear cause. How lost colony ships were found just in time. How rogue asteroids always seemed to miss populated systems by a hair's breadth. It wasn't luck. It was care. Quiet, constant, and never claimed. Lena began teaching a new seminar at the Xenocultural Institute. She called it Lost Voices of the Galaxy. She spoke of ancient human philosophies, of Wu Wei, of non-interference, of helping without being seen. She quoted old Earth poets who wrote about rivers that nourish without demanding thanks. Students listened, intrigued, but few connected the dots. Those who did stayed quiet, as if they sensed the weight of the lesson. Then came the incident on Varick 7. A mining colony on the outer rim reported a reactor meltdown. Evacuation ships were days away. Radiation levels were rising. The Concorde sent emergency drones, but they failed to stabilize the core. Panic spread. Families huddled in shelters, waiting for the end. Daniel was off duty when the alert came through. He saw the coordinates and froze. Varick 7 was near the old human trade routes. Routes no one used anymore. He checked the long-range sensors, nothing, no ships, no signals. But the next morning, the news changed. The reactor had stabilized. Not by drones, not by Concord engineers, by an unknown system override that engaged cooling protocols no one recognized. The colony was safe. No explanation. No signature. Lena found Daniel on the observation deck again, staring at the stars. "They were there," she said softly. He didn't answer. He just pointed to the blank edge of the galactic chart on his datapad. It hadn't moved. It hadn't changed. But now it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a promise kept. One evening, a young cadet named Owen approached Lena after her lecture. He was nervous, eyes wide. "Ma'am, I've been studying old distress logs. There's a pattern. Every time a ship is lost near the border, it's found days later, repaired, fueled, but no one aboard. Just a note that says, 'Keep flying.'" Lena looked at him carefully. "What do you think it means?" "I think someone's still watching," he said. "Even if we don't see them," she smiled. Maybe that's enough. She didn't tell him more. But she saw it in his eyes. He understood. And he wouldn't speak of it loudly. That was how the silence spread. Not through orders, but through quiet knowing. Back on the Aurora Dawn, Daniel received a new assignment. A deep-range survey near the Xenthar expanse. It was routine. Boring even. But as he reviewed the route, he noticed something. The planned path would take them within 2 light-years of human space. Close, but not crossing. Just close enough to feel the edge. He didn't change the course. He let it stand. That night he dreamed of Earth, not as a planet of war or mystery, but as a garden under a quiet sun. People walked its paths, tending trees, teaching children, watching the stars not with fear but with patience. They knew the galaxy was loud, messy, and often cruel. But they also knew it was worth saving. So they saved it in the only way that lasted, without asking for thanks. When he woke, he made a decision. He would never cross the border again. But he would remember, and he would watch. not as a spy but as a witness. Someone who knew that the greatest strength wasn't in power or fame, but in the choice to help and walk away. Lena joined him on the bridge the next morning. She handed him a small data chip. I compiled everything I know about human ethics, history, and language. Locked it behind my biometrics. If something happens to me, maybe it'll help someone else understand. Daniel took it and placed it in a secure drawer. We won't need it, he said, because we'll keep the silence alive. Outside, the stars burned as they always had. But now Daniel saw them differently. Not as points of light to be claimed, but as lives to be protected. And somewhere beyond the edge of the chart, unseen and unthanked, humanity kept watch, not as rulers, not as soldiers, but as quiet guardians of a galaxy that never knew it was being held together by hands that asked for nothing in return. The ship moved on, carrying its secret like a seed. And the silence grew, not from fear, but from respect. Months passed and the silence held. Daniel and Lena carried on with their duties, but everything felt different now. They saw the galaxy not as a map to be filled, but as a fragile thing to be tended. They noticed small things others missed. The way a failing colony's power grid would suddenly stabilize. How pirate raids near the outer rim always ended in confusion with no clear winner. How lost children on frontier worlds were found safe beside clean water and wrapped in soft cloth with no footprints around. No one claimed these acts. No one took credit. But Daniel and Lena knew. Then came the summons. The Concord Council called a rare emergency session. A new threat had emerged, not from war or plague, but from knowledge. A scientist named Dr. Rel Voss had discovered an old human data cache, buried in a derelict satellite near the border. It contained schematics, language samples, and fragments of historical records. Voss claimed it proved humans possessed technology far beyond the Concords: gravity manipulation, near-instant healing, even controlled time dilation fields. His report spread like fire. Factions within the council began demanding action. Some wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to prepare for invasion. All wanted access. Daniel felt sick when he read the summary. This was exactly what Mara had warned about. Knowledge without understanding was dangerous. Technology without wisdom was a weapon. He and Lena were called to testify as the only officers with recent border experience. They stood before the council chamber, a vast dome filled with representatives from dozens of species. Eyes watched them, curious, hungry, suspicious. "Captain Holt," said Elder Kor, a tall, scaled diplomat from the Veln. "You crossed into human space. What did you see?" Daniel kept his voice steady. "Nothing, Elder. The signal was a false echo. We found debris, not data. No ships, no stations. Just empty space," Lena added. "Human records degrade quickly in deep space. What Dr. Voss found is likely corrupted or misread. Human tech was advanced, yes, but not magical. Most of it was lost in their own civil conflicts." A murmur ran through the chamber. Dr. Voss stood up, his fur bristling. "They're lying. The data is real. And if humans are hiding this power, they must be forced to share it. For the good of all." "For the good of who?" Lena asked quietly. "The last time a species tried to share human tech, it started a war that killed billions." "Is that the good you mean?" Voss had no answer. But the seed was planted. The council voted to send a diplomatic envoy to the border, with armed escort. Officially to open dialogue. Unofficially to test human defenses. Daniel's stomach dropped. He knew what would happen. Humans wouldn't fire first, but if pushed, they wouldn't back down. And once violence began, the silence would shatter forever. That night he met Lena in the shipyard. The Aurora Dawn sat idle, but they didn't talk about the ship. They talked about what to do. "We can't stop the envoy," Lena said. "But maybe we can warn them." "Warn who?" Daniel asked. "The humans won't listen to outsiders, and the Conquered won't listen to us." Lena thought for a long moment. Then she said, "What if we don't warn them directly? What if we send a message only they would understand?" She pulled up an old file on her datapad, a human nursery rhyme from the 21st century. Simple words: "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." She explained that early human explorers used such rhymes as coded signals during blackouts. The rhythm, not the words, carried meaning. If we broadcast that rhyme on an old emergency frequency just once, they'll know someone remembers. They'll know we're trying to say don't come. Daniel hesitated. It was a risk. Unauthorized transmission near the border could get them imprisoned, but it was the only chance. 2 nights later, under the cover of a solar flare that masked comms activity, they sent it. Just the rhyme, just the rhythm, sent from a hidden relay drone they'd launched during a routine scan. Then they wiped the logs and waited. 3 days passed. Then news came. The diplomatic envoy had been recalled, not by the conquered, but by the envoy's own captain, who claimed his ship suffered unexplainable system failures the moment they neared the border. Navigation failed, comms scrambled, engines stalled. They turned back confused but alive. No one understood why. Except Daniel and Lena. They never spoke of the transmission again. But that night, Lena received a message on her private channel. No sender, no header. Just 3 words in plain text. "Thank you, friend." She showed it to Daniel. He didn't smile. He just nodded, eyes wet. The Concorde moved on. Dr. Voss published his theories, but without proof they faded into academic debate. The border remained untouched. The chart stayed blank, but something deeper had shifted. Daniel began mentoring young officers, teaching them to look beyond data, to see the quiet patterns of care hidden in chaos. Lena expanded her lectures, weaving human ideas into lessons about ethics, restraint, and the courage to do good without reward. One evening, a student asked her, "If humans are so wise, why don't they lead us?" Lena looked out the window at the stars, because leadership isn't about being seen. It's about making sure others can stand on their own. Humans gave us that chance. Now it's our turn to protect it. Back on his ship, Daniel reviewed a new distress call from a distant system. A transport vessel was adrift near a black hole's edge. Rescue teams were days away. He checked the route. It would take him close to human space, closer than before. He didn't hesitate. He set course. As the Aurora Dawn jumped to warp, he felt no fear, only purpose. He wasn't going to cross the border, but he would watch. He would act. And if help came from the quiet dark, he would not speak of it. He would simply let the galaxy believe it saved itself, because that was the human way. And now it was his too. The stars blurred past. The silence held. And somewhere beyond the edge, unseen hands kept the light alive. Years later, the galactic chart still ended at human space. No new lines had been drawn. No probes had crossed the border. And no one asked why, not out loud at least. The silence had settled into the bones of the Concorde like an old truth too precious to name. Daniel Holt was no longer captain of the Aurora Dawn. He had retired to a quiet post at the Outer Rim Archives, where he cataloged old exploration logs and taught navigation ethics to new cadets. His hair had grayed, his steps had slowed, but his eyes still held that quiet knowing. He never spoke of what he'd seen beyond the border. But sometimes, when a young officer asked why the map stopped there, he would simply say, "Some boundaries exist not to keep others out, but to protect what's inside and outside from each other." Lena Cruz had become head of the Xenocultural Institute. Her lectures drew students from across the galaxy, though few realized her true subject was not history, but restraint. She taught through stories, of gardeners who watered plants at night so no one would praise them, of healers who left medicine at doorsteps and vanished before dawn. Her favorite tale was about a river that gave water to every creature without asking for thanks. The strongest force in the universe, she would say, is the one that flows without needing to be seen. One spring, the Concord Cartography Guild called for an update to the official star map. New colonies had formed. Trade routes had shifted. But when the draft reached the edge of human space, the cartographers paused. They looked to Daniel, now an honorary advisor, for guidance. He stood before the glowing table, the blank zone pulsing softly at the edge. A young cartographer, eager and bright-eyed, asked, "Shouldn't we at least mark it as unconfirmed territory? Or add a note?" Daniel shook his head. "Leave it blank, but why?" The young one pressed. "We know humans are there. We have records. We have guesses," Daniel corrected gently. "And guesses become demands. Demands become conflict. The blank space isn't ignorance. It's respect." The room fell quiet. No one argued. The map was finalized with the edge untouched, clean, empty, and whole. That same week, a minor crisis flared near the Xanthar belt. A comet, nudged off course by a dying star, was on a collision path with a farming moon. Evacuation wasn't possible in time. Panic spread through the system. The Concorde sent engineers, but their calculations showed no way to divert it. Then, without warning, the comet veered. Not by much, just enough. It skimmed the moon's atmosphere, burning up in a harmless shower of light. Scientists called it a gravitational anomaly. Lucky timing. Cosmic chance, but Daniel knew, Lena knew. And deep down, so did the farmers who watched the sky that night and whispered, "Someone's looking out for us." No proof was found. No signal traced. And no one claimed the act. As it should be. Back at the Institute, Lena received a visitor. An old man with tired eyes and a worn coat. He introduced himself as Eli Morgan. The same freighter captain whose log they'd found years ago. He'd heard rumors that someone in the Concorde understood. He wanted to thank them, not for finding his ship, but for keeping the secret. "I lived a long life because of that silence," he said, voice rough with age. "Got to see my grandchildren grow up on a peaceful world. All because humans chose to help and walk away." Lena poured him tea, real earth blend, a gift from a quiet source she never named. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars through the window. Later that year, Daniel visited the Memorial Garden at Concord Central. Among the names of lost explorers and peacekeepers, he placed a small stone with no inscription. Just smooth, dark rock from a river on Earth, sent anonymously years ago in a package with no return address. He didn't tell anyone what it was. He just let it sit among the honored dead, a silent tribute to the unseen. The galaxy moved on. Wars flared and faded. New species joined the conquered. Old ones vanished. But through it all, the quiet work continued. Ships were guided home. Plagues were contained before they spread. Rogue AI cores were gently shut down by codes no one recognized. And every time the galaxy believed it had saved itself. That was the gift humanity had given. Not weapons, not wisdom, but the chance to believe in its own goodness. One evening, as Daniel walked home under twin moons, he passed a group of children playing in the square. They were pretending to be explorers, drawing maps in the dirt. One child drew a line and said, "This is as far as we go. Past here is mystery." Another asked, "Why don't we cross it?" The first child shrugged, "Because some things are better left unknown." Daniel smiled and kept walking. He never wrote a book. Never gave a grand speech. He simply lived in a way that honored the silence. And in doing so, he passed it on, not through words, but through choices. Lena did the same. When a student once asked if humans would ever return to the galaxy, she replied, "They never left. They're just the quiet part of the wind that keeps the stars from falling." Years turned to decades. The Aurora Dawn was decommissioned, its hull preserved in a museum with a simple plaque. A ship that sailed to the edge and chose to turn back. Visitors often wondered what that meant. Only a few understood, and still the chart ended at human space. Still, no one dared to ask why, not out of fear, but out of a deep, quiet respect that had grown like roots through the heart of the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the silence wasn't a mystery. It was a promise. And promises once kept need no words at all.